Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the Lady Walker Show. I am Lady Walker, and beloved, we have a gem dandy of a show in store for you. She is an author and has written her first book entitled Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, Dream Killers. So, beloved, welcome to the show, Jenifer Johnson. Howdy, Jenifer.
Hi.
How's it going?
Just great.
I heard that, just great. Okay, I met you not too long ago before this taping.
That's right.
And next thing you know, hey, here we are. We're doing an interview together. So before we talk about your book, your first book, I did say your first book. Now, I don't know if it's really your first book,
Yes,
but I
it
did.
is.
Oh, okay. Let's give the audience a little bit of information about who is Jenifer Johnson before we talk about the book. So give us a little, what should I say, a synopsis of who Jenifer Johnson is.
Well, I'm 41 years old, and I'm from Columbus, Mississippi originally. That's Northeast Mississippi. And currently I live here in Jackson. And of course, I'm a writer. I love to read. And I love to carry the word of God. I love ministering to others. And I just love God. I just love God. And that's where this book comes from. It's the work of the Lord.
That is great. Any children?
I have one child. He's 19 years old.
Oh, okay. Now, when we met, now I think you said you were retired from a job?
Yes, I'm retired from federal law enforcement.
Okay. So were you a police officer at one point in time?
I was a federal correctional officer, a senior officer specialist at the federal prison in Yazoo City.
Oh, okay. Well, great, great, great. All right. And now what inspired you to write your first book?
Well, actually, when I first started writing, it was because of my career path. It was a must in writing in federal law enforcement. And as I began to write, everybody seen that I had special writing talents. And then later on, my mother, she's a writer. I began to help her with her book. And then I received a prophetic word that God was going to use me to help my mother write, which at that particular time I was already working, which the person that gave me the prophecy didn't know that. So I began working on hers and filling in the gaps where needed, which just birthed out, I guess, what was already in me. I began to write more. So, and then I started writing about things that was on my heart, the things that I seen, current events, different things that I saw in my career. And as I thought I was just writing just to resolve some of my own, concerns. And then eventually I realized that it was the Lord's doing that was causing me to write. And then I received another prophetic word that I was supposed to have books. Actually, while I was writing this book, a young prophetess began to tell me, she said, I see books. She said, you have dreams. And that is the title of my book, Dream Killers. So I said, okay, God, all right, I understand. And then I began to get a little discouraged about writing, thought about not writing anymore.
But what would cause you to get a little bit discouraged?
Because sometimes if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you're just being led as you go, so you don't know the whole full picture. So you sometimes feel like, maybe am I wasting time? Really, is this supposed to be a book? Really, what am I doing? And and then to have something and to know that it's in the birthing stage and it's not actually, you don't have the baby in your hand yet, sometimes you can easily miscarry if you're not, just like if you was pregnant, you could have a miscarriage. Mm-hmm. So if you don't stay encouraged, you will miscarriage the thing that God has for you.
And that is so interesting. That is so interesting because that can be for anybody pursuing whatever dream that God has placed in their heart.
Right.
They can miscarriage or abort that dream if they don't stay encouraged along the way.
And the way that the enemy will cause a miscarriage is through discouragement, just being defeated, a defeated mentality of thinking that, hey, you don't have any really true purpose because you don't know what's really, really, really going on.
But did you ever, did the thought ever cross your mind, who wants to read the book? Or did you ever have those kinds of thoughts?
Well,
Nobody wants to read that book or whatever from that standpoint, or yours was some different thoughts?
I wouldn't say it was those thoughts, because a lot of times when I would be at work and people would be asking me, what are you writing, or what are you doing? Because I see you writing all the time. What are you writing? So once you tell them a little bit of what you're writing, and people, they just get excited about it. So, you know, I knew that once it got out, that people would be blessed by it. But then discouragement comes in, because I would say, T.D. Jakes would say, the hateful middle.
Okay.
In the middle of a thing, because you got to go through the process of writing, and you don't fully know what you're writing. You got to wait till God give you what to write. And then in the midst of getting what to write, and this is your first time writing and putting a book together, then also it's discouragement, because some of the challenges of being a first-time writer, the things that you must learn in the process of the people that you have to deal with, because sometimes when God gives you a dream, all the monies may not be there. It's a faith walk. So, and then being that you at first don't know what you're doing, sometimes things have to be repeated in order for it to be perfected. So sometimes you can get discouraged because, look, I'm spending money extra money that I didn't think that I would have to spend. So that could be a discouragement in the process.
Okay. Now I read the book. I didn't read the whole book yet. I hadn't completed it, but what I have read, to me personally, it's a very good book. It really captured my attention big time, because the way it's laid out and some of the dream killers that you talk about. And later on, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about some of the things that in your book, Attempted Murder of the Dream, Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, Dream Killers. But let's talk about, you started writing as an adult. Did you think about writing when you were a teen or just a child?
As a child, I thought about songwriting. That's what, you know, because you see the different rap videos and the different things on TV, you be like, oh, I could write. I mean, maybe I should write a song, but I never did actually do it. So I never knew that this was in me, that God had a gift of writing in me.
And you knew this again when? That you knew you had this ability?
Once I began to work on my career path and working in my law enforcement training, writing is an everyday process. It's an everyday thing.
So you do it every day? Just
about, because you got to write some form of, whether it be disciplinary or whatever it may be. It's some kind of administrative work that you're going to have to do. So writing is an everyday function in law enforcement in some form or fashion, whether it be filling out a form or something you're going to have to do.
And even from that, I mean, that was able to help you even when God put that in you, because sometimes God will put something in a person and a person may not carry that through.
Right.
And the good thing was that you did carry it through in the midst of some of the things that probably came or stood in your way, the roadblocks, the setbacks. Did you have any? I mean, apart from the discouraging thoughts?
I think that because of my law enforcement career, it put a demand on the gift that was in me. Whether sometimes you may not want to use a gift or may not know that a gift is there, but when something put a demand on you, then it's just going to come out. What's in there going to come out.
Right, once you put that demand on it.
Once you put the demand on it. And then in the midst of putting the demand on it, then you can see, you can touch and feel and see, oh, really? I'm onto something here.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, we're going to take a break and come back and continue talking about your newest book entitled Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, Dream Killers. And then I'll talk about some few other things.
Yes.
All right, beloved, we will be right back. Welcome back, beloved. My guest is Jenifer Johnson, who is the author of Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, Dream Killers. Okay, Jenifer, like I said before we went on break, I have read the book, and very good book to me personally. And I can certainly concur with, quite a few things that you talk about in the book. Let's see. Let's just talk about some of the things that's in the book, and then we're going to come back and talk about some other things. Okay. Now, you got quite a few things, so I'm just going to choose some things, and you can just expatiate just a little bit about it. Like, for instance, a dream killer can be association of the wrong people.
While working in the prison system, a lot of times when you talk with the inmates, a lot of times you would discover that the situations that they found themselves in was because of the people that they hung with. The old people would say birds of the same feathers flock together. So when you see situations, you'll say, that is so true. That is an old adage, but it's so true that a lot of times the children of today, of this generation, has not really been taught that or taught the true meaning of that. So sometimes the people didn't. You would see some guys, I think we had a guy, he might have been like 21, 22. You would see him at a young age, and a lot of times they would say that, hey, the system, I thought because of my age that, you know, I could do what I did. And then they would say that they waited on my 18th birthday, and then they arrested me on my 18th birthday.
Really?
And then I sit in jail for a while until my age that I needed to become for them to prosecute me. And so sometimes the young children follow in the footsteps of the older ones, and they're thinking because of their age that they could get away with certain things, but not knowing that the system is just as evil and corrupt as they are.
Wow, that is interesting the way you put that. And I love the way you give a lot of different examples and stuff from that standpoint. I love it. I love it. And I said, okay, very good example. And again, you can hang around with the wrong people and think that, okay, the person, and I think you sort of said something similar probably like this, but like if you're riding in a car with someone, you may not know that this person has stolen a car or whatever.
Right.
You know, this is someone, a friend or whatever, this is an associate, and you're riding with this person, and then you get stopped by the police, and then you find out this car has been stolen or whatever, or this person has drugs in the car that you know not of, that you knew not of.
And that's one situation where one inmate was telling me what happened was, the law has something called guilty by association, which is really, it's called conspiracy, but it means guilty by association. So basically, he was riding in the car with someone, and he didn't know that that person had drugs on them. And when they, you know, pulled them over, of course they found the drugs. So of course the other person said it was the other person's drugs. So of course, in order to get a plea bargain or a sentence cut, you know, they would put it on the other person.
The person who didn't know anything properly about it
Might end up with the most time, even though they didn't know. Because
that is sad. Wow. And you're right. We have to certainly teach, and you talk about that as well. You know, we certainly have to teach our kids these things can happen. And I know, my grandkids, I certainly try to tell them, their parents try to tell them as well. Just because you didn't do it doesn't mean that you won't get, accused or whatever. Because if you are hanging out with someone and they get caught and you are with them, even though you didn't do anything, there's a possibility that you can go to jail too.
Right. My mother, as a child, would always teach me, if you are an eagle flying high, you have no business in the chicken coop with the chickens.
I like that too.
So if you want to go somewhere in a high altitude, then hey, you don't stoop too low for other people. They got to come up, or either you got to leave them behind.
Exactly, because there is no need you coming down to their level from that standpoint. What is wrongdoing. Anything, you try to bring them up. And you don't need friends if your friends are going to encourage you or influence you to do what is wrong. You've been taught to do what is right. But you got these friends and you think they are cool, and you want to hang around the cool people. You know, these cool people may not have a vision for themselves.
And even sometimes I found that even it could be a family of crime. Some people have crime families. So it's not necessarily friends. It could be even families. Because sometimes in the prison systems, you have almost whole families.
Really?
So And then we're looking at a generation. This book is a book of common sense. What we think is common sense is no longer common in today's time. The reason it's coming to us because it was taught to us, because we was trained. But you're looking at a generation that has not been trained. They have not been taught the Word of God. And a lot of times we get our fear of what to do and what not to do, or what is right or what is wrong, because of our training, our biblical training. We're dealing with a generation that does not go to church, do not take their children to church. So if they're not taught about God and how to fear God, then how can they fear man's law?
Right, that is so true. All right, moving on to something. There's so many interesting things in this book. Okay, you talk about Samson and Delilah issues. That's a dream killer.
Correct. I saw quite a bit in the prison system. You would have these drug lords, these kingpins. They would marry, had families or whatever, but once they got 20, 30 years, they'll end up getting divorce papers in the mail. And, you know, sometimes you come to work and you be like, what is going on? What is wrong? And they would be a little discouraged and disgruntled because of what they thought they had, they didn't have, or what they wanted, they got what they wanted, but then what they wanted wasn't what they needed.
Yes.
Or sometimes you get something and you don't get what you think you got.
Exactly.
And sometimes they married the wrong people, or they marry according to their current lifestyle, not knowing that your life is going to change. You know, as you age, are you marrying somebody for just a right now moment, or are you marrying somebody that can grow with you, that can be beneficial to you, and not only that, can they be beneficial to your offspring, your children? Because if something happens to me, are you going to be able to take care of the ones I leave behind? Or instead of, am I going to leave a blessing behind, or am I going to leave a cursing behind? Because if I leave my children with the wrong people, they're going to be cursed. So a lot of times I heard of a story where an inmate left his wife $100,000. To take, I think he had like 4 to 5 years to do, and he left her $100,000 to manage to help her in the midst of, you know, while he's gone away. Now, common sense would have said, get a job, and you know, this extra money
right,
here,
you can go through that 100,000
right,
just like this is.
Right, but you need a job, so you're gonna have to marry a wife. You need to get a wife. Not a knife. I said a knife is somebody that's gonna cut you, that's gonna bleed you dry.
Okay.
So you need to make sure you marry a wife.
Not a knife.
Not a knife.
Okay.
Not somebody that's gonna cut you and bleed you dry.
Oh, that is so interesting.
Anyways, in a year the money was gone. So now if you have children, you're looking at you leaving them in a bad predicament.
Yes.
So you got to make sure that you're marrying somebody that's not just with you for what you got and what you can give them, but they can add something to you. That, hey, that they can hold a job down, that they can help with some bills if something happens, that they can carry on. But if you marry a gold digger, what she can get, she gonna drain you and then after you gone, she gonna get rid of you and move to the next victim.
That's true. That's true.
And that works vice versa, man or woman.
Right,
however,
exactly.
that works vice versa.
All right. Well, we have come up on a break, and we are going to come back and talk probably about one more of these dream killers and a few other things, and then we'll take another break and come back, and you can give out any information concerning where your book can be purchased and all of that. And of course, I think we have a break or so where the information will be inputted as well. All right, beloved, we will be right back.
God is concerned about your whole life and wants you to have the best. But this can only be done by making good decisions and inviting Him into every aspect of your life. Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, available at tatepublishing.com.
Welcome back, beloved. My guest is the author of Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, Dream Killers. Welcome back to the show, Jenifer Johnson. Okay, Jenifer, now we're going to talk about one more thing in this book, maybe one more thing, if time permits, that you have in this book, Train Up a Child. I love that chapter. I love the way that you talked about that. So Train Up a Child.
I think this is one of the main things of the book that God wanted to deal with, is that God gives each one of us dreams and visions. And we got to learn as an adult what our dreams and visions are, but as well make sure that our children know who they are and what dreams and visions that God has placed in them. If the book talks about the story of Samson, the Bible story of Samson, of course, Samson's parents couldn't have children. And then God blessed them, or before he blessed them with children, he gave them guidelines of how he wanted this child to be brought up and told them the purpose of this child. Well, this child is going to be a great deliverer. The God was sending him so he could help deliver his people. So when God gives us children, he's given us a gift, and we must be a good steward of the gift that he's given us. And when he gives us children, he's placed a dream or a vision in those children. Just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's no doubt, nobody would argue that Dr. Martin Luther King, he was called for a certain purpose that was to be a deliverer, a modern day deliverer of his people. And then not only was he called to be a modern day deliverer, he was a modern day prophet. He was able to lead his people, and the people would hear his voice and follow and obey. And then that was a God-given thing for him to deliver his people. So God has also, each generation, sent deliverers. So the child that you have in your care could be the next modern Dr. Martin Luther King. So if given the next Dr. Martin Luther King, what are you doing with them? Are you raising them correct? Are you teaching him biblical principles that he would have compassion and empathy and sympathy for others? Or are you just letting the world, the TV, raise that child up? Are you sitting that child in front of the TV every day and letting him get his insight from the world, his views and his perspective from the world? Or are you putting the word of God in him, teaching him what God says so that he'll have a heart for God and God's word and God's people? So who doing the training? Is the TV training your child, or are you training your child? Are you throwing them off on other people where they're getting other people's ideologies, other people's teachings, or are you training them up under what you have been taught, what you have been trained, the things that you have learned? Are you giving them somebody else's, just throwing them off and saying, oh, well, you know? A lot of times I see parents, they're glad that their children graduate. They're ready to get them out the house. But children are only given to us for a certain amount of years, and it's not a rush job. The time is going to go by fast enough. 18 years, 21 years will come and go before you know it. But in that amount of time, have you poured into that child what God would have you to pour into them? Have you poured out what God has placed in them so that they'll know who they are? If your child have a love for music, have you taught them about the musicians in the Bible, the things how God used his musicians? Have you sent him to the world so that he can learn all the demonic things instead of what God getting the glory out of his life? So, and then at the end of his life, or at the time he's graduating at 18 or 21, what is God saying to you? Is God saying, well, I'm well pleased with you, you've done a well job? Or is God shamed? Is God hurt because of the things that you have done with this child, with this vessel that he has given you? I mean, what is God saying about the job that you're doing with your children? Because children is a job. It's a blessing, but it's also a job that God has assigned. It's an assignment. It's a heavenly job. It's a heavenly assignment that God has given us. And in the midst of that, are you pulling out what God has placed in that child? When you see your children geared to a certain thing, they love music, or they love to write, or some children like to play church. And I was watching, I think, Facebook or YouTube, one of those social media channels, and this little boy, he was preaching down, and that child is a preacher. He's just doing what he's supposed to. I mean, he had it down packed. I mean, he was having a full service. But that child is a preacher, so in the midst of seeing that he's going to be gifted and he's called to ministry, are you placing him under the care of the men and women of God that can teach him the ways of God? And then is your life lining up where he will be taken care of, where he's raised in a godly manner? I mean, are you a heathen, but then God has placed a prophet in your hand? So you don't want him to turn out to be a prophet of Baal, of a demonic prophet. So you got to, as a parent, have your life lined up, and then you got to make sure that you teach him how to line his life up.
All right. Well, that was well said, but it's in the book, right? It's in the book.
It's in the
One
book.
thing you said in the book, and it was, you know, it prompted me to laugh. You said, I think your mother or somebody else told you when back in the old days, when the women were pregnant, some of them used to rub their stomach and say, Lord, please don't let this be a murderer, whatever.
Right.
And that was, I mean, it's true. Well, of course we pray that, but it was just funny the way it is.
Right. That meaning they understood the significance of being pregnant and carrying a child. The old people would say carrying, we said pregnancy, but the old people say carrying. So they understood the significance of what they was carrying and the significance of the carrying, and not only just carrying in the womb, but carrying in the world.
But yeah, that was interesting too. All right, we're going to take one more break and come back and let you give out any contact information, as I said before, just in case someone is interested in purchasing this book. Do you go out and speak, or?
Yes, I'm available for any speaking engagement, and it is free.
Okay, really?
So just call on me and I will come. God has placed a mandate in me to be a servant, to give what he says.
Wow, how about that?
Because God is concerned about this generation.
Yes, indeed.
God is concerned about his people.
All right, beloved, we will be right back.
God is concerned about your whole life and wants you to have the best. But this can only be done by making good decisions and inviting him into every aspect of your life. Attempted Murder of the Dreamer, available at tatepublishing.com.
Welcome back, beloved. Jenifer is going to let you know where you can pick up a copy of her book, just in case you are interested in purchasing it and reading it and being blessed by it. And she is also going to give out the information just in case you would like for her to come out and speak, okay? So Jenifer, you can look into the camera and let them know either or.
You can find my book at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or anywhere books are sold, or TatePublishingCompany.com. But you can just Google my name and I'll come up. So anywhere books are sold.
Okay, the phone number or
yes,
email,
you can go to my website
for speaking.
You can go to my website and reach me by phone. Get my phone number off my website, which is dreamkillers.tateauthor.com. That's DreamKillers.Tate, T-A-T-E, Tate.com. TateAuthor.com.
Okay, TateAuthor.com. Okay, that's if they are interested in you coming out speaking. So where do you go and speak? Is it at churches and other events, women events, or?
Anywhere that I'm needed, I go. Unless God say don't go, I'll go. And I love to be around young people and women. I have a heart for this generation, the young people, because a lot of times they don't know what's really going on.
Exactly.
And this book will let them know what's going on and can transform their lives.
Okay, do you have another book on the horizon?
Yes, I am working on a book right now, and I even help others write.
Do you? Okay, you help others. Well, how about that? Well, great, Jenifer. Appreciate that. Getting that info out there. Well, it's been a plum-pleasing pleasure to sit down and, as I say, sup a little tea with you. I really appreciate you coming out, and hopefully you'll be back.
Yes,
I will. Before the next book comes out, because we were talking before the show, very knowledgeable in a very, big arena of things.
Right.
So hopefully you'll be back.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, I enjoyed the book. What I have read thus far, Jenifer, very educational, very inspiring, and all of that. I enjoyed it. All righty, beloved, in the meantime, thanks a trio for tuning in, and I will see you next time on The Lady Walker Show. Ta-ta.